Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into something that will completely re-engineer how we think about active classroom learning. I mean, if you've ever tried to gamify a lesson, you already know it can easily devolve into absolute chaos, right? Or even worse, it completely fails to actually teach the material. But what if we could build a framework that fixes all of that? Well, today, we are analyzing the source blueprint for something incredibly cool called the English Racing Challenge.
So, here's the big question staring us right in the face. How do you transform passive classroom boredom into a high-stakes tactical battle? Just imagine taking your driest, most repetitive curriculum and plugging it into a high-octane framework that literally captivates students. It sounds impossible, I know, but as we're about to see, it's actually just a matter of smart design and clear constraints.
All right, let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We've got 5 main stops. 1, from chaos to strategy. 2, the no-dice energy economy. 3, visualizing the racing grid. 4, pacing the classroom experience. And 5, a universal classroom template. Let's get right into it.
Kicking things off with Section 1, from chaos to strategy. It's so fascinating to look at the origin of this system. The creators were observing an intermediate ESL classroom in Indonesia, and the students were doing these standard grammar drills that just left them completely disengaged. Language acquisition basically felt like a passive, repetitive chore. So they tried to introduce a game. But, well, that initial gamification attempt, the catalyst, sparked high engagement, sure, but it resulted in totally chaotic, aggressive play. The students were just hyper-focused on attacking each other, and the actual learning retention, incredibly low. They desperately needed a system that channeled all of that wild energy into structured, measurable progression.
And that realization forced a brilliant strategic evolution. Back in Phase 1, random dice rolls dictated movement, and there were 0 consequences for blind attacks. But then, Phase 2 introduced a core constraint, which was energy equals movement. And that paved the way for Phase 3, which is all about pure strategic planning. So, instead of just rolling a die and hoping for the best, students now have deterministic movement. Resource management actually forces calculated risks, and answering questions correctly becomes the sole currency for moving forward. It's a total game changer.
Let's actually compare the old way with this new way. Traditional board games rely heavily on pure luck with dice, right? And players end up passively waiting during other people's turns. But the English Racing Challenge completely flips the script. Movement is deterministic. Engagement requires active defense and keeping an eye out for a continuous threat of domino effect collisions. The pacing scales dynamically. And here's the kicker. The winning condition isn't just about crossing a finish line. It's about efficiency over blind speed.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the no-dice energy economy.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is defining this constraint. Energy equals movement. It's a deterministic system where 1 point equals exactly 1 tile of forward movement. By omitting random dice rolls entirely, the system completely removes luck. Think about it. If a student wants to move 3 tiles, they have to spend exactly 3 energy points. It forces them to calculate their risks and really manage their resources.
And this constraint builds the foundation for what we call the resource loop. It's a simple 3-step cycle. First, you answer to earn. If a student lands on a normal tile and correctly answers an intermediate grammar question, the system refunds the energy they just spent to get there plus 1 bonus energy point. But if they land on a special tile and nail a high difficulty question, it rewards them with double the energy spent. That's huge. Then they accumulate to win and spend to move.
Now, to keep this engine running efficiently, there are some hard rules. Everyone starts with 3 energy points. You can spend a maximum of 5 energy points per turn, which cleverly prevents those runaway turn lengths where one player just dominates the whole board. But here is the true genius part. There is no finish line. Nope. The game just ends when the time is up and a player's total remaining energy serves as their final max score. This means hoarding energy is actually the key to winning. Oh, and there's the no stacking rule, meaning no 2 players can occupy the same tile. Definitely keep that in mind because it creates absolute mayhem later on.
Let's move on to Section 3, visualizing the racing grid.
Okay, this is where the visual asset integration truly shines. The game master, meaning the teacher, can set up to 6 players, input custom names, and have them choose from these amazing premium avatars. You've got this awesome bear driving a log cart, a frog and a hot rod, a cat, a rabbit and a rocket, an owl and a fox. Giving students a strong visual identity on the grid transforms them from just abstract classroom teams into highly invested competitors. They aren't just answering questions anymore. They are the fox trying to outmaneuver the bear on a 40 to 48 tile track.
But hey, it wouldn't be a racing challenge without a little sabotage, right? If a student lands on one of the 8 weapon tiles on the track and answers the question correctly, they earn a weapon. A turtle shell forces a targeted player to move backward by 2 tiles. A star or laser, that forces them backward by 3 tiles. But you gotta notice the underdog protocol here. If a player is currently in last place and answers a normal tile correctly, there is a random 20% chance they get a massive speed boost, moving them forward for free and potentially triggering a huge collision.
Remember that no stacking rule I mentioned a minute ago? Well, this is where it creates absolute magic through the domino collision effect. When a weapon hits player A, they get pushed backward. If player A lands on a tile already occupied by player B, the no stacking rule triggers and player B is instantly displaced backward 1 tile. And if player B lands on player C, you guessed it, the loop triggers recursively. A single well-placed weapon can reshuffle the entire class leaderboard in the matter of seconds. It keeps literally everyone on the edge of their seats continuously monitoring the board for active defense.
Let's shift gears over to Section 4, pacing the classroom experience. How does one teacher manage all of this chaos in a 60-minute session? Well, the entire game is actually controlled by the teacher from a single admin screen. The teacher controls this escalating tension just by clicking a button to advance the round, and the game's atmosphere instantly updates. Like in Activity 1, the background music is light and casual. But as you progress to Activity 3, and eventually Activities 4 and 5, the audio scales up to these high-stakes, intense, heavy tracks. The rising competitive tension in the room is perfectly matched by the audio-visual intensity on the main display.
And what's happening underneath that rising music is the curriculum itself shifting. Advancing the round automatically swaps out the current question bank, so the class moves from reflexive pronouns into adverbs of manner, into comparatives and superlatives, and finally faces those high-difficulty questions on tenses and inflection pitfalls right during the most intense musical tracks. The difficulty of the English grammar questions scales perfectly alongside the rising stakes of the game.
Finally, let's pull back the curtain for Section 5, a universal classroom template.
This brings us to an insight that is much bigger than just an English lesson. If you strip away the grammar questions, look at what you have left. The engine core, the energy economy, the deterministic avatar movement, the domino collisions is entirely fixed and self-sustaining. That means the architecture is completely content agnostic. The content payload is totally swappable. You could replace the English grammar questions with math equations, historical dates, or science trivia, and the game would function exactly the same. It is a foundational template ready for absolutely any subject.
I really want to leave you with this quote from the blueprint that perfectly summarizes everything we've explored today. True gamification is not a distraction from learning. It is an engine that demands mastery of the material as the only fuel for victory. I mean, wow. By locking movement behind correct answers and making energy the final score, the students cannot win by just playing a game. They literally have to master the curriculum to earn the fuel required to play.
So the final question for you is this: what subject will you gamify next? You now have the blueprint. You understand the no-dice energy economy, the power of visual avatars, and the thrill of those domino collisions. Take this architecture, swap the payload, and revolutionize your own classroom. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this sparked some incredible ideas for your next lesson plan.